it's the Titanic analogy. In other words, when you're on the Titanic and then it's the iceberg, it's all over. What you want to make sure is that you're not on the Titanic or have some protection ahead of time, because it's going to be very difficult. People can buy stuff very cheap right now, with the upside being spectacular. Once everything starts to change, it's human nature. People will not want to pay up. So now they can get stuff, gold and silver at bargain basement, cheap prices. And now's the time to be paying attention, when the average person, it's out of sight, out of mind, and not paying any attention.
As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. Today we have a returning guest, Bill Murphy, co-founder of GATA.org, the Gold Antitrust Action Committee, as well as founder of LeMetropoleCafe.com, commentator and well-known expert on gold market dynamics. Bill's back here with us on Reluctant Preppers to talk about the implications of gold and silver precious metals in the market and what it means for the individual homeowner and head of family who's trying to protect his family from unreasonable risks. Welcome back to Reluctant Preppers, Bill.
Great to be back. Thanks for having me.
It's been the better part of a year since we had you here on Reluctant Preppers, and one of the things, again, I'm recalling is from a statement that you made at the first Liberty Mastermind Symposium, where you were asking, I believe it was David Morgan, on how did we get it so wrong of thinking that the spike that we had a couple of years ago in precious metals prices was the start of a big wave that we expected to continue. And if you could help folks understand, especially people who we became aware at that time of the importance of precious metals as real money and as a way of reducing risk for their families, and maybe they even took a position of obtaining for the first time some precious metals to help reduce their family's risk and exposure to loss of savings and that sort of thing. If you could circle back with us now and say, for those people who did that step, was that the wrong move to make at that time, or was it the beginning of something bigger to come? And what's been, in your view, holding down the price of precious metals since then?
Well, it's a very good question, because the answer is yes. Everyone's made a wrong move from back then in the sense of what silver has done. But, that's today's news. And the gold cartel, as I call them, decided, 3.5 to 4 years ago to take gold and silver down and keep them under the most intense pressure while we're having all this quantitative easing or printing money, in Europe now, in the United States, Japan. And they went in overdrive to take this thing down, silver from basically 50 to 15, and they've taken, gold into the tank. And they've done it for that reason, to deflect from what's really going on in the sense of this money printing, as I just mentioned. And it's been very, very painful. But at some point here, they're going to hit the wall with what they're going to be able to do. And it's liable to be very violent on the upside, especially in the silver market. I mean, Dave Morgan knows much about silver as anybody in the world. And none of us have been able to understand where they got the silver to do this, but they did. I have my own theories, but they're just theories and no sense going into them now. But basically, J.P. Morgan and their allies have been able to bury the silver price. And if we're correct, they're gradually going through all the stash that they accumulated to meet demand. And when they lose control, it's going to go berserk. And $50 will be low when that happens. I know I'm a really big Eric Sprott fan of Sprott Asset Management, one of the smartest men in Canada, and he believes that the price is going to go well over 100. So people and I believe that to be the case as much as anything I've ever thought of about a market. So anybody who bought silver, well, short term, they may be in the weeds here. It's going to be something spectacular on the upside, and when things start to blow up in other areas, they're going to be doing quite well, and will have that mental and financial comfort.
And as you look at ongoing factors that are happening in the precious metals market, could you walk us through what you see to be the main drivers and evidence that things are in fact being suppressed? And then later on we'll circle back and ask you more about when people look around and see in the economy what appears to be vibrant activity or signs of life in the economy, why things might not always be what they seem to be?
Well, the first thing you notice in gold and silver is how they trade. And this is like talking about a murder trail. I mean, it's very hard to, when you've got 100 things to bring to people's attention, it's very hard to do it in a short period of time. But at the end of the presentation, you'd say, guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. I mean, it's the way it trades. I mean, gold goes down most every day at 3 a.m. New York time when the London traders go to work. The market is follow through is never allowed. Excitement is never allowed to hold. Excitement is constantly crushed. They always take it down around the first notice day or an option expirations when the shorts to be protected. It's the constant lousy market action over and over again that adds up, because you see the same drill time and time again. And of course, it's not just all them. They're able to set certain patterns in motion, and other traders see what they're doing and jump on board. So, when you add it all up, if the price of gold had just kept pace with inflation, it would be at least double what it is today. More than double. That's how egregious this has been. And to think of silver was at $50 for whatever reason, 35 years ago. And here we are back at 15 again, or 16. And they're artificially way undervalued. They've been pounded down here by what we call the gold cartel, going into action, concerted action to keep the prices down here to defray from what they're doing. Think of gold as a thermometer or barometer of U.S. financial market health. Whether I like it or not, that's how people look at gold. Every time it goes way up, it's something negative for the money and power. It's a crisis of some sort, bad for the dollar, too much inflation. It's always a negative. That's how it's perceived. So now with all what they've done, they've got the price of gold and silver in a tank, and everything is pretty much copacetic from what they present to the world. And they get whatever they want because there is no free press. I mean, God is not allowed to be mentioned, basically. We go to reporters and present things, and they tell us they're not allowed to mention us. They can't ask questions to central banks. They'd be fired. This is everywhere we turn. So it's what they're doing, all this money and power, is working, and it will until it blows up. And when it blows up, it will be violent. And that's where we go back to what you're talking about in terms of protection for people to have some gold and silver and interest in the sector. Out of sight, out of mind. One, it'll be financially good, but it'll make people aware of when this thing is blowing up, and they'll know how to deal with it in a much better way.
So on that note of people who are considering making preparedness if they're concerned for their families, you mentioned precious metals being a sort of an inverse indicator of confidence in the economy. As they go up, it means people's confidence in the economy going down. What are some ways that you see artificial confidence attempted to be built in the economy? You mentioned specifically the active suppression of precious metals prices as a way of deflecting attention from them. Do you see other evidence of illegitimate ways of trying to pump up confidence in the economy versus what's actually happening?
Well, from our camp standpoint, we talk about the plunge protection team from times that props up our stock market, the counterparty risk management group that is allied with our government to be there to stabilize the market. Every time you get a sharp dip, it goes back up, and you get a strong stock market, and it builds confidence in in what's going on, and that's what they want to do, especially for the consumer and so on, to make them feel better, to spend better, and to keep the economy going. So you have to almost watch it on a day-to-day basis to see what they're doing, and they keep on doing it. At the same time, there are a number in our camp that feel our stock market's about as overvalued as it's ever been in history. And there's different measurements that they make, to come up with that conclusion. But it would appear, you could be making a massive top in our markets. And as I mentioned, gold and silver are about as undervalued as they've ever been in history relative to what's going on. So by paying attention now and getting on board by buying some gold and silver, or even buying some of the gold silver shares, it's going to be a spectacular situation. And because of what I call the gold cartel and what they have done, many people are giving up on this because it's been quite a long time now. And but when it turns, that's the one thing I'd say, it's going to be violent.
And then turning the attention to individual homeowners and families, I mean, what would be, again, we underscore here that this is not a financial advice channel and we don't give personalized financial advice, but what considerations for individual family risk reduction do you talk about with friends that they should consider, actions that they should take if they're wanting to reduce their exposure to the vulnerability in our economy and our dollar?
Well, again, I'm no financial advisor either. I can just say, if out of sight, out of mind, having exposure to gold and silver because it's the inverse of what's going on now in the markets, and you can buy them so cheap. It will give people some comfort that if all heck breaks loose, that they're going to have some coverage in that, and it's like an insurance policy. You hope it doesn't happen, but if it does, and it will, they'll have their protection for their family and welfare and so on. And I'm sure everyone in our camp believes that way, and I certainly do. And all I can say is it's likely to come out of nowhere and be spectacular. So it's worth paying attention to.
So what kind of things should people pay attention to, and where can they, as you've said recently, they cannot rely on traditional mainstream media sources to get their heads up that, okay, things are changing, things are about to go bad or whatever. What sources can people turn to, and what kinds of factors should they be watching for that would indicate to them that a major shift is coming?
Well, there's a lot of people that they can access on the internet that talk about the gold and silver markets that are, very good people. I have my own publication. People can sign up for a 2-week free trial of the Metropole Cafe. They can go to GATA.org to get information from my colleague Chris Powell. That's a free service. And that's a good point. It's just to become aware of what else is going on that you won't get from a traditional mainstream sources, because by the time that what we think is going on really surfaces there, it's the cat will be out of the bag, as they say.
A question we've asked other guests in the past, and it's been appreciated by our viewers, is for an individual family, how much gold or silver should they consider taking into their possession, and why would that range be appropriate for a family?
Well, again, it all goes back to the same thing. Protection. I'm prejudiced in terms of being, way overweighted in gold, silver, or the shares. But, the traditional thing that people talk about is to have 5 to 10% exposure. You'll hear that from, a lot of money management people. Again, it's like the insurance policy you don't want to collect on, but it gives you protection against other things, blowing up and being able to not get buried too much.
Do you have a personal opinion about the ratio of gold to silver? If you could start from the discussion of what you see on gold to silver valuations in the marketplace versus historical, and what you would consider people holding in terms of a ratio of gold versus silver from an insurance risk reduction standpoint.
Well, back in days past, you had a 16-to-1, gold to silver ratio. It's going up in the 60s and in the 70s. Silver is by far, the most explosive of the two. It's a smaller market. We don't know where they got the silver, the physical silver, to keep the price down here. So when this thing blows, that's why silver should be anyway, the huge winner, because when J.P. Morgan and their allies lose control of this scheme, which we can see them operate, all the time. I mean, this past week, I think silver is just going straight down more than $1. That's where the real spectacular returns will be made.
Just thinking if there's anything new or different that you've come across in the past few months, since it's been about a half a year since we had a chance to talk to you, if there's been any new revelations in any of the research that you've done, or any new threads of activity or evidence that you're seeing that are different from what you've seen in the past, or has it been primarily a continuation and increase of what you've seen before?
It's a great question, Don. Again, it's Groundhog Day. that's what is so tiresome about this. It's the same drills over and over again. If anything, I mean, the silver fundamentals are a little more cloudy to really get, but nothing has worked on the bullish side for gold or silver. I mean, with all this Chinese demand and other central banks buying, and they just keep going through their stash, central bank gold, to meet this demand, and yet at some point they're going to hit the wall, and that's the thing. It'll be Groundhog Day till all of a sudden everything has changed, and that's, I think, what I'd like to stress the most to end this is that it's like it's the Titanic analogy. In other words, when you're on the Titanic and then it's the iceberg, it's all over. What you want to make sure is that you're not on the Titanic, or have some protection ahead of time, because it's going to be very difficult. People can buy stuff very cheap right now, with the upside being spectacular. Once everything starts to change, it's human nature. People will not want to pay up. So now they can get stuff, gold and silver, at bargain basement, cheap prices. And now's the time to be paying attention, when the average person, it's out of sight, out of mind, and not paying any attention.
Well, before we let you go, Bill, do you have any further words of advice or wisdom where people can get further information? You've mentioned GATA.org and Le Metropole Cafe. Any other thoughts before we let you go?
Well, again, there's a number of good people that put stuff out on the gold and silver market. My bent, of course, is on the manipulation issue, because it's why people should stay in the game. We know how undervalued it is because of what they have done. We've been doing this since 1998, and this is in gold. Silver was below $4 back then, and gold about $2.75. And after what's all occurred, with this QE and stuff like that, gold and silver today are about as cheap as they were back then. So that's the opportunity that people have today that they just don't see. And everybody will have a different way of looking at this, and some people may even be bearish here. But so it's hard for me to go to specific other people other than what we do. But I think you're going to see gold explode, and you're going to see silver well over $100 an ounce, and now's the time to be looking at it.
Well, Bill Murphy of GATA.org and LeMetropoleCafe.com, thank you again for joining us again here on Reluctant Preppers and sharing your insights with our audience. We'd like to have you back another time.
Hopefully it'll be next time we get together, things will have already kicked into high gear.
You'll be telling us, I told you so.
That's right.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Dominic.
Take care.